turn around, look at me. You're doing such a good job. I'm really proud of you. I'm really enjoying playing with you right now. Within the archetype of the dominatrix, there are actually 4 sub-archetypes. The seductress brings in that erotic energy of like, maybe you will, maybe you won't. Maybe you can get close to me, maybe you can't.
There's beauty in being totally accepting of who you're with. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. There's no point in trying to change anything. Or is it a red flag? Is it this, like, who cares?
My mom was not a happy person, and she very often was angry. I got hit a lot more than I got hugged.
I don't want to negate that, the 5-year journey, or for you to negate the 10-year journey that you've been on. This started a long time ago when you decided that first time. It's just an interlude.
So, yeah, there's just been a lot to heal.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast and to my conversation with Juliet Jules. Juliet was a very popular guest on her first episode with me, so I'm sure you'll join me in being delighted to have her back on the show. If you're wondering why I'm dressed like this, the UK is extremely cold at the moment. So if anyone from North Face or Rab is watching, I could do with a new coat because my other one, the zip has bust. So yeah, hit me up in my DMs. Today's conversation was quite deep. It was a really beautiful conversation. We delved into a bit about Julia's childhood, her upbringing, how she kind of ended up having to raise her younger sisters herself, and she talked about how she felt the pressure to provide for them, which led her to starting as an exotic dancer. She talked about somewhat turbulent upbringing and adolescence, so I really appreciate her vulnerability. We talk a lot about BDSM, Kink, the evolution of Kink and BDSM, historical roots of dominatrix culture. We talk about the different archetypes of the dominatrix, which I found very interesting and fascinating. My own journey of being less judgmental around those who are kinky. And then at the end, Julia opens up for the first time about her struggles with alcohol, which was very moving. And I'm sure you will join me in thanking her for her vulnerability. And those of you who know me well know that I have my own story with alcohol. So this is a good conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And check out Julia's work, follow her on Instagram. Don't forget, if you like me, to subscribe and all that good stuff. And yeah, enjoy the episode.
I wish I had some more definitive, oh, this happened and that led to this, and then that happened and da-da-da, and here I am. And I don't know that I do just yet. However, I will say that my parents were very, very different people. My dad was and is to this day a born-again Christian, very religious, very conservative, very traditional, and very much believes in this God of heaven and hell. You have to really prove that you're good enough to enter the gates of heaven, and that means accepting Christ as your personal savior and being filled with the Holy Spirit, which in their church is like, I don't know if you're familiar with, I don't know how global this kind of church is, but they speak in tongues. So it's sort of, everyone does it a little bit differently, but that is proof that you're filled with the Holy Spirit. And if you're not filled with the Holy Spirit, then you don't get to enter heaven.
Yeah, like, look, we hear that. Yeah, like if you're like hard Christian, that's pretty much, that's like Old Testament God, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And obviously, yeah, so we have people like that over here. Less common these days, I think, but our American cousins, we like documentaries and stuff, and you see people who are pretty full on for the church.
Yeah.
I feel like
I
you
mean, I
guys go
used,
just like full send on everything.
I know, I know. Yeah. Um, so I used to be angry about that, and now it just makes me sad. Like I feel like sad about people that are really tangled up around God and spirituality in that way. Um, so that was my experience with my dad, and then my mom, on the other hand, was very open-minded and very curious, and we had books in our house about Buddhism and like paranormal phenomena and UFOs and like, basically anything that was, curious new thought. We had books about it in our house. And so, growing up in that kind of juxtaposition or
Mm.
polarization of like, do it this way, this is the only way, or you're going to burn for eternity. Those are pretty high stakes. And then my mom was like, well, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's read, let's be curious. I don't know.
How
Um,
did so how did they get together? If that was, or did your dad develop the hard Christian thing like as the relationship went on? Like,
so they were both really good looking people
good,
when they
good,
were young. I
good
think that, and
attributes
they,
to have.
they were like 22 when they got together. So I think that probably played a role. Uh, my dad was raised Catholic, and he became a born again Christian after my parents got divorced. So his kind of conservative leaning was there before.
Mm.
He's also the oldest of 10 kids, and, just a lot of responsibility that came with that. And, he had a pretty rough childhood himself. So yeah, so he became a born again Christian. I mean, like it tracks for him, but it was also really hard to grow up under that. So for me, I think I just rebelled against that, because it was just like I felt like I got the message that I would never be good enough. And so it was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be good enough, then why bother? Like, if you think I'm bad, I'll show you bad. So I, I'm just kind of checking in with myself to see how personal I want to be. Part of me is like, just tell the story, just go for it.
Take your time.
Um,
We can always edit as well. Don't forget.
okay,
But obviously it depends on your.
yeah. So I also don't want to start crying. I feel like it would be okay if I did, but I just want to keep it like,
It's
um,
totally okay. Actually, it'd be thematic because I did a podcast with the world's expert on crying this morning. So you could be
maybe
doing
it's
us a
in the air.
service.
Okay. The tears are flowing already. So so yeah, my parents divorced. I was sort of caught between this, and my parents would just fight like, oh my gosh, it was
Mm.
just pure. It was such a bitter relationship between the
How
two of
old
them.
were you at this point?
I mean, they got divorced when I was 2. I have an older sister. Um, and it was just like, I never saw them be nice to each other. Not once. Not, hey, how's it going? Oh, good. How are you? Yeah, the kids, la 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 la. Never. I mean, it was just bitter. As we got older, they didn't have to talk to each other as much, and so I didn't see that, the fighting that would go on between them. Um, but yeah, it was just like looking back, it's like, when you're a kid, your home environment is just like, oh, this is just how it is. Um, but as an adult, it's just like, wow, you guys. Um, so, so my mom died when I was 18, and she had had 2 more kids by someone else. Um, and it was just like this huge mess. And I felt like I had to rescue my little sisters and take care of them and I was 18, going on 19. And it was just like the scariest, most stressful experience I've ever encountered. I mean, and I just think back at myself at that age of just like, how, like how did I do it? So, so long story short, I call legal aid. It's like free legal services in the US. I call legal aid and I explain the story. And this woman, who I will never be able to thank, says, she's like, basically, I'll spare all the details, but she's like, basically, she goes, you could go take those kids out of that house right now, and there's nothing legally anyone could do. They were in a really bad situation. And I was like, okay, great. So my maternal grandparents were still alive at the time. And I called them and I said, this is the situation. I'm going to go get the kids. They were 10 and 4 at the time. I'm like, I'm going to get them.
So you were 18, they were 10 and 4, your mother had passed away, and your stepdad?
They were never married, but sure.
So is that who they were with in the oh yeah, sorry, because that's yeah, your younger sisters are from different marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
but
yeah.
weren't married, sorry. Different partnership. Yeah.
Different partner. Not my dad. They have a different dad. So so basically I kidnapped them legally in a way. So so my grandparents were like, well, I was 19 by now. And my grandparents were like, you're too young to handle this responsibility. Why don't we take the kids until, we can't take care of them anymore. And then, if you need to step in, you can step in. So, my mom's partner, ended up going to prison a few years later, which was great for everybody because he's out of the picture. Mm-hmm. And then, there we were just kind of like picking up the pieces of this just devastation, and I just felt like I had to do anything to take care of my sisters. So I started, I became an exotic dancer, stripper, whatever you want to call it. And because to me, I was just like, I had to get a whole bunch of money like really, really fast. I'm like 21. This is just like baffling to me. Just like the danger that I don't know. So that's what I was doing for a few years.
This is all in California, right?
I'm sorry, this was actually in Arizona.
Arizona. Where in Arizona?
In the Phoenix area.
Okay.
Kind of the Metro Phoenix area. Yeah, that's where pretty much where I grew up, and I lived there till I was 27, and then I moved to California.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's what I was doing because I felt like I had to just like get money together so that, that when the time came that I had to have the full responsibility for my sisters, then like we would be okay financially. This was my plan at 21.
How'd that work out?
It was just a lot of worry for nothing because the older sister ended up, she was with my grandparents until she was 18. And then the younger one didn't end up living with me until she was like 15. So it was like many years that had gone by, but I couldn't see it that way at the time. It just felt like all this fear and pressure and, yeah. So, I mean, all in all, it wasn't a terrible experience. Sometimes it was really fun. And, in Arizona, it's very conservative there. So, there isn't any sexual contact happening in the club, at least in the clubs that I worked at. It was just like very much like a girl on the stage. And if you got a table dance, it was like there was some, closer proximity, but there was no physical contact at all. Like maybe like an arm touch or something like that. But it wasn't like, there was no like lap grinding or anything like that. So I was safe. I mean, it was still dangerous in a way, but it was also safe in terms of it just being like a lot of rules and, protection in place. So, I mean, as it relates to becoming a sex coach and where I am today, I I've always been curious about life in general, and that included and still includes to this day, like sexuality and relationships and intimacy and all of that. So, my first real boyfriend, I mean, I have the language for it now, but at the time, I didn't really know that, oh, we're both kinky. We're both curious and adventurous and open. And so we had a lot of fun. I mean, we would just like push the boundaries and just like, ooh, let's go to the adult bookstore and see what we can find. And like, oh, I mean, we did some things like sort of exhibitionist kind of things, like not crazy, but like we we actually had sex in a movie theater one time. I mean, we're like, I think I was 20 by then. He was a couple of years older than me. We were just like kinky, wild, in
Sounds
love.
fun.
So yeah, we're just wild. Um, yeah. So I guess because he was the first person that I was really, had a deep relationship with, a committed relationship, a more sexual relationship with, I felt like that's what sex was going to be like, you know, all the time. And then the next person that I was with was really conservative. It was like he was not exploratory or adventurous sexually at all. And he thought there was something wrong with me because I was a very sexual person. And
Mm.
I don't know, that's just weird to me because it's like I wanted to be sexual with him. It wasn't like I was, and not that there would be anything wrong with somebody wanting to go to sex parties or um,
Yeah.
whatever you'd want to do as long as it's consensual. I just say that because to me, I felt like I wasn't presenting anything that was that wild. It was just like I wanted to be adventurous and explorative and whatever with him, and he was just like, "Oh my god, like why would you want to do that? Like, ugh." Um, so I was like, "Oh, well, maybe there's something wrong with me,"
Mm.
and so I would just sort of. Well, that relationship didn't last for very long. And then I got married to a Turkish guy. So he is a little conservative, if probably not surprising. Um, but again, just got the message that, my sexuality as a woman was not okay. Like there was like a certain way that we were supposed to have sex and that was it. Um,
Why'd you marry him?
because I was driven by this idea that I had to have somebody to take care of me because I had to have
Mm.
someone to help take care of my sisters eventually, some maybe, I don't know. So
Mm.
that was a big motivator for getting married. So um that poor guy. Yeah, I've had to make amends to him later. Just, I mean, we were both young. It was a mistake on both our parts, but I just felt like, I don't know, I felt regret for wanting to
Mm.
get married, and I feel like getting married was my idea. Anyways.
And it sounds like from the middle relationship, like that seed had been planted of it's not all right to be kinky. There must be something wrong with you. So then the next guy, like if the next guy after that would have been like the first guy, free and kinky, alive and kinky, whatever,
Yeah.
um, then then it would have been a totally different path. But it's almost like that second time around, it's like, oh right, yeah, it's me. Like I must just be weird and kinky, and I better like be a normal person and get married or whatever. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
I think it's
Hmm.
like I think back to very different situations, but like if you don't have that like confidence in your yourself. What's the word? Self-esteem. It always comes down to self-esteem, doesn't it? And you look at
Yeah.
like, why did I do that? And it's like, because you had no sense of self. You were looking to others, and that's why it's yeah, it can be a dark path getting into those relationships for sure.
Yeah. And, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't
Hmm.
know that there was any other way. I didn't have the language
Hmm.
of, this is who I am as a sexual person, and this is what I like and what I don't like. And if you are cool with that, that's great. If you're not cool with that, that's great too, but we shouldn't get together. Like I didn't know that. I thought sexual compatibility would just happen if you're attracted to each other. Like, oh, it just takes care of itself. Because that's kind of the message that we're given culturally is like, oh, we all just know innately how we're supposed to have sex and it just takes care of itself. And, it's fine. And if it's not, then something's wrong with you. Go fix it or don't worry about it. I think that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Knowing me now, knowing what I know today, if I could go back and tell my younger self, like, you're fine.
Mm.
Just find people like you. It's okay. They're out there. I promise. It might not feel like it, but yeah, you're going to be fine. But here's how to communicate what you want. Here's how to hear what somebody else wants. Here's how to negotiate and find a middle ground, potentially, if that's something that you want to do. So, um, so yeah, I mean, for sure, the self esteem wasn't there, but also just the knowledge, having the information to know that there was another possibility, many possibilities. So,
Mm.
so yeah, I mean, I just very much felt like there was something wrong with me, and uh, was just sort of, I guess, taking a chance. When I would meet someone, just sort of hope that we were a good match. Um, and then I met someone in my, I guess, late 20s, and we were both pretty adventurous, and like we just loved each other so much. We just like had the best wild times and a good relationship. And that lasted for a while, maybe 4 or 5 years. And then just time and circumstances, it had to end. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't really learn about making peace with my sexuality, about having like all my parts together. I didn't have to hide anything or, or feel like like my good girl was really who I am. Like this is my true self, and like all the other stuff can just go away, or like, am I really, is there something wrong with me? Am I a quote unquote bad girl? And that's just who I am. And I kind of just have to keep that under control. Like over the last few years of doing a lot of work that just, you know, I'll get into why in a second, but um, I've done work where I'm like, oh, I have, I wouldn't even call it good girl and bad girl anymore. It's just like I have what society might deem as a good girl side. Like I'm very nurturing and I can be very motherly and very like, I love being, I guess, I don't know if a homemaker is the right word, but like I love decorating my home and like making it really cozy for people to come over. Like I love cooking for people. And I guess more traditional is the way to put it. Like I have like these very traditional feminine values,
Mhm.
but then I'm also like kind of wild. Like I have a bit of a wild side and an adventurous side. And I like to, I don't really see myself as being monogamous, and I'm more like open and all of that. So I guess society might deem that as like my bad girl side, but it's just non-traditional. But I can be both. I don't have to choose one or the other. I can be both, and as I age, I'm sure that could change. I hope it doesn't, but it might. Um, but these aren't like adversarial sides that I have to choose between and only be that one person to the detriment of the other. I can be all of it. It's just it all those parts make me who I am. So, um yeah, I wish I would have learned that, but I guess some of that just comes with age and wisdom, the wisdom that
Mm.
comes with age and experience. So, yeah, so all of that came about through doing the Evolutionary Dominatrix Academy, which, then like I had no intention of becoming a dominatrix when I took that training, but that was, I mean, I got so much out of that training, but that was one of the biggest things, was that I don't have to have these adversarial parts inside. I can just be friends with all of it, everything that I am.
Yeah, it's powerful. What if you weren't wanting to become a dominatrix, why was it that you took that course?
I took the course because in the intro webinar that Mistress Damiana Chi is the founder of the Evolutionary Dominatrix Academy, and so she has introductory webinar that you watch to see if you want to do the training. And in that training, she talks about the dominatrix archetype and how within the archetype of the dominatrix, there are actually 4 sub archetypes. And those sub archetypes are the queen, the authoritarian, the seductress, and the mother. And the reason that those 4 archetypes are important for the dominatrix is because as a queen, your submissive is to worship you. You are to hold this high, sitting in a throne kind of archetype. Like, I'm a queen. I'm to be worshipped. The authoritarian is the strictness. Don't fuck around. These are the rules, and you follow them. The seductress brings in that erotic energy, that that eros, the erotic energy of like, maybe you will, maybe you won't. Maybe you can get close to me, maybe you can't. We'll see. And then the mother is there for safety and nurturing, because that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. But there is a very nurturing uh, and safe element to that dom sub relationship in every session and in the relationship itself. And then, as a part of each of those archetypes, there's a dark and a light side. So the dark side could be like the mean queen, like aloof and like, maybe I'll look at you, maybe I won't, And the light one is like gazing lovingly into your eyes as you're sitting at my feet worshiping me. Those are some very kind of basic examples, but there's a dark and a light to each one. And depending on the type of submissive and the type of session that it is, those different energies can come out. So she explains all of this in that introductory webinar. And I was just like, my chin was on the floor. I was like, I was just so blown away. And it was in that. And she also had a few of her students giving their testimonials. And a few of them were saying, like, this is what brought me home to my femininity. This is what anchored me into myself. So watching that webinar and seeing what was possible in that, oh, the motherly side of me can be at home with my seductress side, like with my authoritative side. Like, my powerful side can exist with the one that's also very generous and open. It just like, it communicated something to me that was like, oh, I can be all of these things just in my presence, just in sitting here. And I was like, I want that. I want whatever this is. Like, I want to be a part of this. I want to learn everything that this dominatrix, beautiful, incredible person has to teach. I love Mistress Damiana so much. She's just such an incredible person.
So should she create these frameworks and concepts around?
I think she learned it from her mentor. Uh, I'm sure that it was something that, or like a framework that someone along the way kind of um, articulated. But I think it's something that's just natural as being, and I wouldn't even think of it as being a dominatrix. I think that it's there are those potentials within women, just like those potentials exist within masculine energy in men,
So,
you
so
know.
within the so you've got the archetype of the dominatrix, which has four sub archetypes, which are what was it? Uh, mother. Run me through them quickly. Mother,
Queen,
queen. Uh,
mother,
yeah,
seductress,
seductress,
and authoritarian.
authoritarian, and then within those ones you have a light and a dark. So it's like you've got like eight different touch points, different kind of modalities, masks to wear, kind of thing.
I like to think of it as energy, like a
Energy,
flow of energy. Yeah.
and
But
and and what we're saying is that these traits can be men or women, but they're like the core feminine traits. Is that what we're saying?
I would say so. I mean, just
Mm,
like if we want to look at it from a male perspective, we could have a king,
mhm,
an authoritarian,
mhm,
a seducer,
mhm.
and a father.
Yeah, and then it'd be like the seducer would be like the probably like the charmer, the
Hmm.
James Bond, and then the authoritarian would be like the what's the word? The tyrant.
Well, that could be the dark authoritarian, would be the tyrant.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So in yeah, it just fascinates me. So I'm like, okay, right. So what's this mean? so so when did all this stuff come about? We might have tapped into some of the history of it on the last episode, but like let's reverse engineer like this concept. Like where does this start to come into play in history and um yeah.
So the earliest recorded dominatrix is the goddess Inanna, which I think is from like 3000 BC. She was this goddess in Mesopotamia. And the myth is that she was, she's a goddess. So she embodies that queen energy. And she was a shapeshifter herself, and she would take people and sort of play with like gender roles and gender norms. And um, I have forgotten some of the history around her, but she's sort of known as the original dominatrix. Like that goddess energy is considered the original dominatrix. From there,
And this is like
throughout,
obviously like a myth that's been passed down.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so from there, yeah, dominatrix is throughout history. I don't really know. I couldn't really tell you like, and then this happened, and then this was
Mm.
the next thing, and then um,
That's
I
all
know
right.
that what we know now as kink or BDSM, or so what we know now as kink, what we call kink, that umbrella term of, you know, alternative kind of sexual practices that include BDSM, that humans have always incorporated these different kinds of, whipping rituals and bondage. And I actually created this whole, it was my final project. I need to finish it. Like I'm almost done. It's my final project for one of my certifications, actually. And it's the hidden history of kink. So even in the Kama Sutra, there is instruction about how to like bite your partner properly and how to incorporate like wrestling. And so these things that we consider to be like non-normative sexual practices or that fall under the umbrella of kink have been practiced for all time. It's just we today put everything in that bucket of what we call kinky practices.
And presumably that it was normal for such a long time, and then along comes the Catholic Church, and then all of those ways sort of get put to a side. Then you have like this shame thing, and like, oh no, you need to be this and that, which is interesting how it kind of comes full circle back to like, your father had a, was it Catholicism background. um yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So going back to the mid 1800s, there's a guy, his name is Richard Kraft von Ebing. He's considered kind of like one of the first sexologists. And he was putting together a manual called the Psychopathus Sexualis. And so he was categorizing all of these diagnoses for sex crimes. And so in that book, that's where we got the terms sadism and masochism. They were originally coined for that book. So what's interesting about that is, so Marquis de Sade he was a writer, and he wrote several books about what we now call sadism. It was actually, he's actually the reason why we call it sadism. But he wrote these books where he was getting sexual gratification out of inflicting pain on people. The problem with that is that he actually was doing it like he was drugging his like his housekeepers, and he was just like doing all kinds of really terrible things and then writing about it and like how he got the sexual gratification out of inflicting pain. And so he like went to prison for it, and so Richard Kraft von Ebing coined the term sadism after Marquis de Sade's writings about his practices. So, and the reason that he was creating this manual was for doctors and judges, basically, to have a way to diagnose people. So in that regard, like sadism, I can understand where that came from. However, it doesn't mean the same thing today, because consensual sadism is a whole lot different than, obviously, than inflicting pain on somebody non-consensually. That's a crime. That's abuse.
Mm.
But if it's part of a play scene and part of a session and it's consensual, then it's not abuse. I can get more into that too if you want to talk about that. But the term masochism comes from Leopold, oh my gosh, Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, I think is his name. I'm probably getting that wrong. Leopold Sacher-Masoch. I'm pretty sure that's it. Anyways, so he was just the guy that liked to be bossed around by ladies in fur coats. You know, he was a wealthy guy, and he would often ride like in the coach or like the poor part of the train, and he would pay his mistress, pay for her first class ticket on the train, and like she would wear furs and like boss him around and like beat his ass sometimes, but it was consensual. Like he really enjoyed it. And so he wrote Venus in Furs about his experience, but there wasn't anything non-consensual or like criminal or depraved about it. Anyways, that's where we get the terms sadism and masochism from. So Kraft von Ebing took these writings of these two guys and, basically named it sadism and masochism after their names, their last names. But it was put in a book about pathologies. So then Freud comes along, and that's where we got the term sadomasochism. Freud actually coined that term into one thing. And again, pathologized it, making it this really like sick, perverse thing that people participate in.
Mm.
Yeah, there's more history there, but that was part of my presentation on the hidden history of kink.
Thank you. No, that's yeah, that's fascinating. What about does BDSM like ever intersect with spirituality or even religion?
I think it does. It doesn't have to. Sometimes people can just have a BDSM session. It can be a spiritual experience because it can be a transcendental experience. Um, there are, I'll have to find the person's name, but there is a man who's a dominant, but he's also a um, shamanic practitioner. And so what he does for his, as part of his sessions, is he creates sort of like a, I don't want to say soul retrieval because I don't know that for sure, but he creates it sort of as sort of like a journey into the underworld, as kind of a like a vision quest experience for people. So he really combines these shamanic practices with a BDSM session. Um, BDSM is infinitely customizable to the people involved. So if you want it to be a spiritual experience where you are actually working something out, let's say, that can be created with the right practitioner and the right kind of set and setting. There are people who really enjoy a kind of like priest and nun role play, and so they really bring in these like Catholic or religious symbols and archetypes to, you know, play in these ways that are like super taboo and, you know, sacrilegious.
Mm.
So that can be done. Um, yeah. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're getting at? Or was there something, a different way you wanted to look at that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I was yeah, I suppose it's still very like it's still so hard for me to imagine what these things are like. So I'm constantly trying to like, right, okay, so is it like this? Is it like this? Is it like this? Do you ever do like do you ever do like online BDSM?
Mm-hmm.
What's that like? Or like, I'm trying to think, is there a way that you can like put in the picture of like like what a typical session, or even like one of these underworld things? Like that sounds like interesting. Like what's going on there? What's the setting like? What's is there any music? What's do you know what I mean?
So online sessions are more, to me, are more psychological because I'm not there able to um, physically discipline the person for not doing what I say.
Hmm.
Um, for example, like I can't actually bind them in any way because we're not in person. So it has to be more psychological. So what I will do is have the person set their camera up so I can see their whole body and see the room that they're in. Like one time I did a session with someone and the room that they were in was like, it was a total mess. And I was like, did you prepare for our session today? He's like, yes, mistress, yes. I'm like, did you do your best? Yes, yes, of course, I would do my best. Why are you in a room that looks like trash? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, look around. He's like, and so sessions are typically done. The acronym is CFNM, clothed female naked male. So what I'll do at the beginning of the session is like be able to see the person head to toe with it, and they have their clothes on. I'm like, take off your shirt. Let me examine my property. And they're like, instant, like, because it's vulnerable and it's supposed to be. And so they're like, take off their shirt, and they'll usually drop it on the floor. I'm giving away all my secrets right now. They'll just like,
Please.
and they're like, pick up that shirt and fold it right. I don't tolerate sloppiness in my presence. I don't care if you're in my presence or at home. Pick it up and fold it. And they're like, usually like freaking out. Like, you don't have to hurry, but you have to do it right. Okay. It's so fun. And then I'll have them like turn really, really slowly.
Okay.
And like my eyes are looking at every inch of you. Slower, faster, stop. And they're just like, so you're putting them on edge. Just like, what is she going to do next? Am I doing it right? So it's more psychological that way. And then, then it's up to the person to discipline themselves. So if I tell them to do something and they do it wrong, then I'll say, okay, you have to turn around and spank yourself hard. And then they'll start. I'm like, are you counting? How many is that? Like, so you're just looking for everything that you can possibly do to correct them and establish my authority. That's what I'm doing. And then give them a little prize if they do it right. You turn around, look at me. You're doing such a good job. I'm really proud of you. I'm really enjoying playing with you right now. This is really fun. This is really fun for me. And they're like, she likes me.
I'm laughing because I'm trying to like feel it a bit, and I'm like, yeah, it's interesting.
And it's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. Like it is funny. But for some people that really enjoy that female authority. And the thing about it too is like having someone tell you what to do there's so much freedom in that, because like you don't have to perform, you don't have to make any choices. They don't have to do anything. Like I'm in charge. I'm controlling the whole situation. So for a lot of people, there's a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah, I'm getting like, there's like similarities with it's almost like drill sergeant, or like even like when you go to like a class where like this is what you're going to do. And like like there's something just so about just someone just telling you what to do. Like whether we're talking about BDSM or anything else, like I'm sort of connecting with that a little bit now. Whereas someone who's, because I run a company and stuff and all the decisions are on you, it is really nice on occasion for someone to just give the instructions and you're just totally present. So I feel like there's there's definitely some like alignment there. And interesting you say what was the archetype? Like that mothering thing. It's funny how it's almost like we look for these archetypes, these sub-archetypes in like all areas of life in a weird way. Or like anyone with authority, perhaps, is a better way to term it, would it?
I think so. I think there's always a dance of dominance and submission between people. And it can be, more obvious and pronounced and more subtle. at times, you know, like we're always communicating something with our body language and with what we're wearing and how we, like, the expression on our face. I mean, and you know, obviously people are not the same on every day. Every day, like sometimes you're tired, sometimes you're in a bad mood, whatever. But just like being out in the world, I think we're always kind of naturally sensing that, you know, sort of, it could be maybe perceived as a status game. But I think we're actually more perceptive about that, kind of these, you know, hierarchies or dominance and submission or power, kind of, maybe it's a power struggle, maybe it's a power game, depending on how you want to look at it. But I do, yeah, I think we're always sort of attuned to someone's confidence, someone's status, and that, you know, who's the dominant person in this room, who's the more submissive person in this room. But the cool thing about knowing what you are, how you are, and what works for you is, I think, especially in relationships, you know, because like you might see people in a relationship, and let's say it's like the wife is just like a ball buster. You know, she's just like what looks like being super mean, and the guy's just like, okay, you know, I feel like if that couple understood that she's maybe, well, I mean, obviously like more dominating than he is, maybe she has more masculine energy and he's more of the feminine energy, then learning to play with that, it can turn into power play rather than a fight and a power struggle. And it can actually like enhance their sexuality and the sensuality in their relationship rather than diminish it.
So how would that work practically? So in that example,
I think starting with an awareness of it, just like, oh, we're having this struggle in our relationship. I mean, and every couple is going to be different. So it's hard to say for sure. Like, this isn't prescriptive because everyone's different. But like, what is it about the dynamic that brought you together? Because it was something. And what are some ways that feeds your eroticism? Okay, well, how do we find out what your eroticism is? We start looking at like peak turn-ons and peak experiences over your sexual history, what like your earliest memories of your sexuality are. Is there a theme that kind of runs through that? You know, does it, before you got together with that person, does it feel like you've always been in relationships with women who were dominating? Or like for the wife or the female partner, like, do you feel like you've always gotten into relationships where you have to tell them what to do? Well, what's that about? There could be some eroticism tied to it and something that the person is actually trying to work out, but they're not totally conscious of it. So it's not as simple as like handing the wife a crop and some, you know, shiny thigh high boots and like, like, okay, you're the dom now. And, you know, putting a collar on the husband, like, okay, there you go. Like, the props are great, but it's not that simple. It's like you really have to get into what someone's core eroticism is and look at what their experience have been, what the theme has been throughout their life. There's something there. And then once you understand what that is, it's not that hard to figure it out. It just takes some time to really think about it. Just thinking, journaling, letting memories come back to you. And then where do your, you know, in this particular couple, where do their erotic themes overlap? And how can they start to play with that? Like, what kinds of role play can they do? How can they bring more sensual energy into their relationship when they're having those power struggles? So there's a lot to work with, but it really takes like digging into what it is that's really driving their attraction and their eroticism. And then you can sort of come up with different role plays and ways to play with it. That's where I would start with a couple like that.
Yeah. Interesting. I wanted to just add as well, I was reflecting on when we first spoke earlier this year, 2024, this will be out in 2025. Actually, how much my own perception and like learnings on like the whole kinky thing have developed, and definitely like stemmed from our conversation. I'm so much less judgmental, I think, now.
That's great.
Yeah, like I was recently in a short-term sort of dating relationship, and yeah, she was a bit more kinky. Uh, but there was like zero judgment from me. Like I was like, all right, cool. I'm not. But you know, like it really wasn't a thing. I was kind of like, all right, cool, yeah, and then so yeah, that's been good to kind of, because I think as well, there's that also plays into like this. Well, if you do think that that's a problem, then you might want to change them, and then like that's a
Mm.
whole other issue. Um, Not that I would want to, but like there's beauty in just in general, just being totally accepting of who you're with. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. But but there's no point in trying to change anything or digging into why that is. Or is it a red flag? Is it this like who cares? Do with your own shit. Yeah. So yeah, I want to thank you for that.
Of course. I'm so happy to hear that. That's great.
Mm. Still pretty vanilla though.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's funny though. It's like it's almost like the whole neurodivergent thing. The neurodivergents all talking about how left out they felt of society, but then like I feel like where are all the neurotypicals at? And like are they thinking they're not
Mm,
part of the neurodiverse club now? And then I feel like it's like that with the kinky thing sometimes. I'm like, yeah, well,
yeah.
actually more people seem kinky than are not. Feels like um which is was not good or bad, is it? It just is.
Yeah. And I think we do have to be a bit careful with labels still
Mm,
because kink is such a broad label, and so many things can fall under the umbrella of kinky. And a lot of times people hear kink and they hear BDSM, and it's not. You know, BDSM is actually a subcategory under the umbrella of kink.
mm,
Um, but like, is the label helpful? I think all of us just being a little more open minded. And if there's something that we don't totally understand, like, well, asking our partner or even a friend or whoever, like, well, what do you mean by that? What does kink mean for you? What
mm.
describes kink for you? If you're calling yourself kinky, what does that mean to you? Does that mean that you like BDSM? Oh, no, I would never want to be tied up and spanked. Well, what does kinky mean? Oh, well, it just means that I like being a little wild, or I like going to um, sex clubs, or I don't know, whatever the person could say, you know, like,
What That's probably worth tapping into actually. So yeah, so you have uh kinky is the like the broad umbrella of alternative, like alt sexuality, I don't know, or alt sexual preferences, whatever. Preferences is always a weird one because it sounds like preferences meaning like male or female, but it's like, what do you prefer? Is there a better term for that? Is that right? Sexual
um,
preferences. No, orientation would be orientation, and
right.
preferences like, yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Preferences. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Things
like
that you enjoy, desires.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, and then as a subset of that, which falls under that, is BDSM, which often gets confused with, yeah, those things get used interchangeably. But actually, a kink could be just like, I like dressing up. That's not going to be BDSM, but it's a kink.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Is it a kink?
Yeah,
Like
I
if
would
you
say so.
said, "Oh, I like my partner wearing like sexy lingerie," is that kinky or is that just normal? Sorry, I hate not normal. Is that just uh regular
Preference.
regular preference? I don't know. Like who doesn't like sexy lingerie?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's not kinky, but to other people, it would be. And so that's another thing about calling yourself kinky is that it's so subjective. And
Mm,
I don't know what the word would be, but like you get to define what it means to you. So
yeah, interesting. Like I don't like sexy lingerie. I just that's way too kinky. I just need nudity, and that's all. Um,
yeah,
yeah, where are the
I mean,
boundaries between like kink and tassels? Tassels, probably.
if it leather lingerie, then it's kinky. If it's lace, not so much. No,
Mm,
I'm just kidding. I don't know. It's
mm.
totally subjective.
Is
But
there
the
a
thing is, it's
is there
like
a flap?
it's like yeah, exactly. Um, uh, so it's only kinky by virtue of being compared to what the mainstream says is normal. Well,
Mm,
what the mainstream says is normal is monogamy, sex within a marriage, hopefully or preferably to create a family, to procreate, and only missionary with the lights off. Like that's kind of the picture of what's normal,
yeah.
so with that in mind, anything outside of that is kinky. So it's like, well, yeah, we probably are all a little bit kinky. So that's why I think we have to just be careful with labels. That's why I say that. Um, and also, sexuality and our interests can change over time. So,
Mm. Hey, here's a question for you. So you said lights off then. That made me think like, oh, I've had like the odd relationship where not odd, like the occasional relationship where like it needs to be lights off. Um I know I always think of that as like being quite like lack of confidence, restrictive, maybe. And then I'm like, oh, maybe it's a bit kinky. Like total darkness. So, is it actually kinky? Lights off or not kinky?
up to you,
Up to
up to
you.
your partner.
Yeah. Is there a role of storytelling or fantasy within BDSM or kink?
Yeah, I would say so. Do you mean like fantasy role play or
Mm-hmm.
like dirty talk or
Uh,
all of the above?
all of the above. Good. Let's double click on that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, give me some examples.
Okay. So fantasy, I mean, again, it's like, and this is my lens that I'm speaking from. So, um, so fantasy, is it kinky? Sure. Sharing that. It could be like what comes to mind is, let's say a couple is going on a weekend getaway and they're like, well, what should we do? Let's make a list of our fantasies that we want to exchange. Like, doesn't mean we have to do it or not, but like, so
Mm.
maybe like the Monday before the Friday that they're leaving, they're like sending text messages back and forth or voice notes. I guess that kind of incorporates dirty talk and fantasy.
Yeah.
So, So when we get to the cabin, the first thing we're going to do is shut all the blinds and make the room completely dark. And I have some glow in the dark body paint. Or maybe like, I'm going to close all the blinds and I have a surprise for you.
Mm.
I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to have to just try and guess until Friday. Something like that. I mean, that could be kinky because you're just like building up all this anticipation, you know, that kind of
Yeah.
incorporates fantasy and dirty talk. Role play for sure. I mean, I kind of think like BDSM is all role play. You know, when I step into a session and I'm playing the role of the dominatrix, you know, I'm we are playing in the dark. We are playing in these like places that we don't normally get to play in regular life. So in a way, it is all a role play. But I have done sessions where I am a mean, like a mean principal, and someone's been sent to the principal's office for being bad. Um, so yeah, I mean, you can certainly do role plays of like mean cop, mean teacher, um, mean boss. That's a fun one.
It's always these authority figures again, right?
Yeah.
What about
I mean, that's it. Can I say something real quick about
yeah,
that?
please.
So within BDSM, it's important for and that's one thing that sets BDSM apart from power play is that there is a clear dominant and submissive. And so there are things that the dominant would do in the beginning to establish their authority and establish their position of power over the submissive. So those that domination and submission and establishing power and authority are hallmarks of BDSM. So that's what sets a true BDSM session apart from, you know, power play. So so there has to be an authoritative element. It doesn't necessarily have to be as crystal clear, like I'm the mean cop or I'm the boss or I'm the principal and you're the student. It doesn't have to be as clear as that if there isn't a role play element that's being incorporated into it. But there are things that the dominant would do to establish their authority so that the sub knows. And the clearer that authority is, the safer the sub feels. Like if I'm wishy-washy about my authority and coming across as like I don't know what I'm doing, or if my body language is portraying that I'm feeling not confident or not really into the session, then that's my submissive is not going to feel as safe to let go and be in the moment of the session. So establishing authority is really important.
What would you say to someone who's listening and they're like, yeah, I want to get into this, I want to try this, but they're kind of like, oh, they don't want to be judged by their partner, or what advice would you give to them?
So I mean, if it was somebody who was, let's say, brand new, they've heard the term kink, they've heard the term BDSM, maybe seen a few things here and there in different TV shows, but that's about it. I would have that person spend a little bit of time reading some books to start to learn for themselves what they like. So there's a really good book called Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. And it's a little bit dated. I think it was probably published in maybe the mid 90s, but I really love it because it gives a lot of really great information and it's done with humor. So that would be a good book to start with because it's a really easy read and a toe into the world of kink and BDSM in a really light way. So by reading that, somebody could be like, oh, that seems really hot and fun. I think I do want to try that, but not that. That way, when they come to their partner to share they know the kinds of things that they want to start with, and they can present something to their partner really, and start really slow too. But first, figure out some things that you do want to try. If it's something that you can kind of experiment with on yourself, do that. When you decide to talk to your partner about it, do it outside of the bedroom. Do not bring things up for the first time, especially if it feels very vulnerable to you, even when you're about to have sex. Like if the two of you are like heading to the bedroom and clothes are coming off, like do not start the conversation there, because you're already in a vulnerable position. It might put your partner in a position where they feel like they have to say yes, even though they don't really know what you mean. And it could put you in a vulnerable position, because if the person has like I don't know what you're talking about. What do you like a reaction that you're not prepared for, like makes you kind of shut down, then you're not going to want to bring it up again. So bringing up the conversation outside of the bedroom, but when you are feeling connected to each other. So you don't want to start a conversation like after, like on a Friday after like a really hard work week and you're both exhausted and just kind of cranky. That's not a good time to bring things up. So when you're out on a date and you've had a nice meal and you're feeling like really like, we're having so much fun. Yay. We're both in a good mood. We're both connected. Then, so there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about, and I feel a little bit nervous bringing it up.
This sounds like a setup for all of the dates that went really badly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like we're having such a great time. You're like lured into this, like, I've just been thinking about this thing. Sorry, it just reminded me of something, but yeah, yeah.
Oh, that you've experienced?
Yeah, I think no, it's weird. Like, obviously, past relationship wasn't successful, but we would always have this pattern of like a really great night, great time, good food, just as you were setting it up then, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
something's on my mind. And not in, like, I wasn't talking about BDSM or anything. I can't even remember, but it would always, I would like, it was almost like I was put into this comfortable situation, then I'd just blurt something out. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would always go like a little bit, but alcohol was involved as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
I took it
You bring
off
up
topic there.
no, that's a great point, actually. I'm glad that you said that, because having the conversations when you're not drinking or another, any other in, sorry, when you're not drinking or otherwise inebriated, don't bring things up when you've been drinking, because if like somebody could get their feelings hurt and then like emotions just run high. So thank you for saying that, because that's a really good point. Like
It's a good point. I
having
come
one
from a
glass of
family
wine.
of that we only bring things up if we've had a
Mhm.
drink.
As so many people
Yeah,
do.
which is really
Yeah.
not a nice environment.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Um, so there's something I want to talk to you about. Feeling a little nervous about it, but I'd like to talk to you about it. And then affirm the relationship. I think we have great sex. I love being with you. And there's something that I would like to try. Can I share it with you? And then let's say it's bondage. Don't jump right in and be like, I want you to tie me to the bedpost and use me for your pleasure. And be like, well, what does that mean? What do you want me to do to you? Tie you up? I can't even tie a knot. Like, what are you saying? You know? So like, oh, and then so if it is bondage, like, okay, have you heard of like being tied up? And then, yeah, maybe. So I think I'd like to try that sometime. Maybe we could just start with like, tying my hands. Do you think that'd be something you'd be open to? Start super slow, like take it like baby step by baby step by baby step. And if you're not sure how to do that, that's what I'm here for. Like, that's why I, as a sex coach, exist, is to help people have the sex that they want to have and do it in a way that doesn't scare their partner or scare them or kind of like wreck the sex part of their relationship. Like, how do we start slow? How do we build it slowly? How do we establish trust and vulnerability, emotional safety? Um, there's a lot there. There are a lot of layers to it. So baby steps into whatever it is that you want to try. And if you're not sure what your partner knows or doesn't know about kink and BDSM, I would just don't even use those words, because there is a lot of stigma attached to them. So like if it's bondage, like, yeah, I think I'd really like to experience being tied up. Like, what do you think about that? And hopefully your partner is open to it. Hopefully they'll ask you, like, well, what does that look like? And if they don't ask you, like, as the person presenting it, you can say, and what I mean by that is, this is what I have in mind. But again, like, if you have an extreme fantasy, that's totally fine. I wouldn't share that right away. Just start slow.
Yeah, like I've got this fantasy of tying you up in an Italian restaurant whilst you're in the restaurant.
All these people are in on it.
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting? Are you ready?
Yeah, with spaghetti.
Yes, with spaghetti. And again, like establishing some safe words, establishing some boundaries. Like, we can start, and if someone's not comfortable, you can say red, whatever your safe word is. But yeah, again, like, that's why I exist. That's why, many of us sex coaches exist, to help people with this.
Drop you a DM.
Yes.
I was wondering, we'll start to wrap this up shortly. What are your thoughts on the like long-term relationships and BDSM? Like, do you see those that participate in BDSM, do they have longer relationships from your perspective? Do they have shorter ones? Are they more likely to be polyamorous relationships or anything like that? What are some like trends?
That's a good question. I think people who are involved in BDSM have longer relationships, because the communication skills that it takes to have a healthy BDSM component to a relationship are communication skills that transfer into all areas of the relationship. Being able to share that vulnerability. And when you share that kind of vulnerability with someone and they hold it, there's a level of intimacy that develops between you that is really powerful and can help, to keep the relationship together and deepen what you have together, deepen your friendship, deepen your love for each other, deepen your intimacy. So I think those relationships can last longer. I've known people who are monogamous and polyamorous. I don't think I can really comment one way or the other if there's a trend of polyamory or monogamy. I think it's so depends on the couple.
You mentioned before, did you say you were like non-monogamous? That was like your preference?
Yes. And what that means to me is, I am single right now. I was seeing somebody casually for a while. But what I would like to have, what this means to me is, like, I want to have a primary partner, and I want that relationship to be like, if there's an opportunity that one of us wants to connect with somebody else in a more intimate way, and that doesn't mean like sexual intercourse necessarily, but just, perhaps a BDSM scene, perhaps a kink scene, that we're both free to do that. Or like, if my partner goes on a guy's trip and happens to meet someone, I want him to have the freedom to do that. I don't necessarily want to know about it, but knowing that these are the boundaries of our relationship, that's what I mean by, that's what non-monogamy looks like for me. I'm not someone who would have a primary partner who then has another primary partner. I don't think, I mean, ask me again in 10 years, who knows?
Hmm.
But today, right now, I don't want that. That's not something I want. So to me, that's what non-monogamy looks like, is
Yeah,
having sort of a fence with a gate around our relationship, I guess.
yeah. And there's a big difference, isn't there? I suppose like non-monogamy and polyamory get thrown around together. But like as you described there, that's not there's clearly not it's not polyamory. Like, because polyamory is like more than one relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is fascinating to me. I've spoken about this before, and I don't know if it would ever be for me, but like I do love like this kind of the advanced communication that you need to be able to operate that kind of relationship, and like the um yeah, someone said it to me, it was almost like just having the freedom to be able to do whatever means that you end up actually not doing the other thing.
Sometimes.
Because it's kind of just like, oh, you can go and chat to that person, and then turns out you just wanted to chat to them, you didn't necessarily want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, very interesting. I've got this little section that I'm doing at the moment where I've got a selection of cards in front of me. We're running slightly low on time, so we'll see how many we can get through.
Okay.
Um, Pick a number from 1 to 4.
4.
Okay. What is the unobvious thing that you struggle with?
mm. The unobvious thing that I struggle with, I think it's perfectionism. Uh, and just feeling like there's always like, oh, I could have done that better. Oh, that could have been better. Or like, oh, I have to have everything absolutely perfect before I can release it into the world. Like I've been
Mm,
sitting on this, oh, okay, I'm going to admit this. I've been sitting on creating a group program for the longest time.
I think we spoke about it on the last
Oh
one,
my
yeah.
God, don't say that. Maybe it's completely obvious. That's why I was like, I think I'm hiding and maybe I'm not, like I think I'm hiding all this like perfectionism and blah, 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 but maybe I'm not at all. Maybe people are like, oh yeah, she's a procrastinator.
It's only because
Maybe
you just
it's,
told me. No, I know. I
it's
was like, oh no,
abundantly
you did mention
obvious.
this. Yeah.
But I just have to get out of like, it's not about me at the end of the day. It's about people who would want it and need it. And if people don't resonate with it, then I'm like, okay, cool. Scrap that idea. On to the next thing. Like I need to just like put it out there. So I guess I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been sitting on this idea that I've had for like creating like a membership community or a group program where people can count on having like an every Monday meetup online. And we, present a topic, everybody gets to talk about it. It's a way to meet other people that identify as kinky, have new friends. But also, like in our world, I feel like there's actually an epidemic of loneliness. Like so many people are so lonely. And I really think that it's because we don't have a place where we can actually tell the whole truth about who we
Mm.
are. And I think when we have that, then it's, if we have time, I can get more into my own personal stuff that's been going on for me lately, but it's just like, oh my God, the truth does set me free. It's human that when we tell the truth, it's like, oh my God, like the release of energy and the freedom. Um, and by the way, I really feel like telling the truth doesn't mean, it does mean like if I'm holding back a secret from someone, or if it's a lie by omission, then admitting that, yes, that's truth telling. But also, I think truth telling is like, what do you want? Like, what do you dream about? What's that dream that you have in your heart that you haven't told anyone?
Mm.
That's telling the truth too,
Yeah.
telling, like, being your full self in the world. And yes, it's scary. I totally get that. But yes, loneliness, I think, does stem from just not having a place to tell the truth. And when you do, having an empathetic witness and having someone actually hear you and see you and feel understood. So that's why I think, like, whatever community I might create, that's the most important thing. Yes, it's around sexuality and kink, but there's a lot of other things that we would talk about too in that community. Because, like, I love personal development, and I've been, like, reading so many amazing books lately. Dr. Benjamin Hardy, shout out for him. If you don't know who he is, highly recommend.
Mm. Just on the community thing, what's holding you back other than perfectionism? What's holding you back from doing the community?
Possibly like commitment and responsibility.
Yeah, like once you set that role in.
Yeah. Like, what if it takes off and people love it and they count on it? And I don't know, like, just saying that, I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to do anything else
Nice
for the
problem to
rest of my
have though
life.
if it takes off.
I know.
Have
Yeah.
you to two things? Have you ever, like, you'll be aware of 80/20 principle, right? You could 80/20 it. Just get it out there, because holding it back might be like take it away from like you, like what if someone else might need it.
I
I
know.
feel like sometimes I wrote this down the other day, like trying to leverage motivation for others rather than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes it's more powerful. Um, and another thought I had was fear setting. Have you heard of this? Fear setting. It's like a bit of a stoic practice. Tim Ferriss did a TED talk on it. And basically, it's a bit like what you were just doing then. So you'll look at what's the worst thing that would happen if I did this and it went wrong or whatever, and then what, and then what, and then what, and then what,
Mm.
and then what, and you just get to like the
Oh.
core fear, and like usually it's like nothing, and what it usually ends up uncovering is just like the potential and the cost of not doing it. So I will, if you're interested, I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
It's quite a good exercise. I haven't done it for some time, but yeah, and it's like rooted in stoicism.
Love it.
Could be useful for you. Um,
Yeah.
should we? Sorry, you mentioned some of the personal struggles, some personal stuff you've been going through, like, and you said you can tap into it.
So, yeah, it's an exercise in telling the truth. Um, I have struggled with alcohol addiction for a long time.
Wow.
And I've gotten sober. I've gone to AA in the past. I've gotten sober and then just not, gone back to drinking. So I'm going to AA again, and I'm sober again.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I know what I'm seeing now is that this always makes me start crying, but oh well.
It's okay.
When I was sober before, I just felt like for some reason I didn't deserve it. Um, for anyone who's been to, oh my God, I'm sorry. I thought I turned that off. For anyone who's ever been to a 12-step meeting, at the end they read something called the promises. And it's just basically like how amazing internally your life will be by getting sober. And by the way, what I understand is that being an alcoholic is not a moral failing on my part. It's just something I was born with. It's something that was given to me as a struggle so that I would grow. I really believe that. And having this struggle has taught me about compassion and self-worth and self-care. And it's just like working me in ways that I thought like it's so painful and so hard, and I'm in absolute awe because I know that God, higher power, source, whatever you want to call it, is holding me the entire way. It's like I feel like something amazing is calling me forward. And by committing to not drinking, it's about so much more than not drinking. It's about stepping into a life that I can't even imagine. I have a hard time putting it into words still. But anyway, I just keep coming back to that. Like I got sober in 2011 and I worked a program in AA. I did my steps. I made amends. I had commitments, and I just, at my core, I just felt like I didn't deserve it. I felt like I had made too many mistakes. And
What's changed?
I don't know. I don't think I can point to one thing. I also started doing internal family systems work lately, which is like parts work. And through that, I really got to see, or I really do see that we all have parts inside of us, but at our core, um, we have a soul that is completely still connected to God, and that there's nothing, I didn't put it there, and there's nothing I can do to take that love away from myself. It's there. I might have parts that are, a perfectionist or a procrastinator or an alcohol. I don't think I'm an addict because I just don't, but like alcoholism for sure. I mean, it runs in my family. But there's a part of me that has an alcohol addiction, and that part of me needs to be loved and cared for. But it doesn't make me a bad, horrible person who doesn't deserve a good life because I've made mistakes.
Yeah.
So I think through doing parts work, and a lot of things. I mean, like I'm always doing some, working with a therapist, or like I've been to several ayahuasca ceremonies. And I mean, one thing I didn't really talk about in talking about my childhood is that, like, there was a lot of trauma there. I mean, just like my mom was not a happy person, and she very often was angry, and um, I got hit a lot more than I got hugged. I'll put it that way. So, um, yeah, there's just been a lot to heal. Um,
I'd give you a hug, but I can't.
Thank you. I appreciate being on your podcast again and having the opportunity just to share. And if you want to cut all this out because I'm crying, that's totally fine. But
I would like to keep it in, but it's up to you. Yeah, and I think it's yeah, like a big part of like the motivation behind doing this is like just to like talk about our struggles. And sometimes I lose my way a little bit with like that kind of thing, and then but essentially I think the podcast that you listen to where people share these types of experiences like you are, or maybe I have in the past, is probably the ones that make them the biggest impression of people who do feel lonely. Um, I'm surprised we haven't talked about alcohol before, actually. Like, I don't drink, right? Yeah.
Well, it was a
Um,
secret for me, so why I don't want to talk about my stuff. I didn't want to talk about my stuff around it because it was a secret.
mm,
I was hiding it. But
when
anyways,
you
yeah.
said you went back to AA like fairly recently. How
Mhm.
recent?
I mean, I went to a meeting like November 18th. So today's
Okay.
December 13th. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my sobriety date is December 4th. So 8 days.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you. I'm just I'm grateful you shared that with me, but I'm also happy that you've like found your way back. Um, and it's like I think one of the things that one of the things within the sober community that I'm not super fond of is like the counting the days thing. Um, I mean, whatever works, right? And everyone's different. But I think what I always think is, how can I put this? Like it feels like those that like lose their days count. There's like a bit of like we said it before, a bit like Old Testament God, like a bit of stick
Hmm.
there rather than carrot.
Yeah.
Because I'm on day one, or and I feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, what is it? Like it's coming up like 2 years since I last touched a drink, and I do my best not to really give it much energy, not to count and stuff like that. But actually, like I've not been a drinker for like 5 years, you know, like that's so I almost feel like I don't want to talk about the 2 year thing. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to
Yeah.
negate that the 5 year journey, or for you to negate the 10 year journey that you've been on. Because actually, this started a long time ago when you decided that first time, and just because you maybe along the way ended up drinking again, like it's just an interlude. And it doesn't mean that like the right thing to do is to like go out and get drink like
Hmm.
um yeah, and lose your sober streak. I'm not saying that at all, but it's like I don't know, where am I going with this? I'm being very careful with my words because I don't want to like, do you know what I mean, like interrupt. Like you're in a really like a nice place with this, right? But I suppose what I'm saying is like if it does happen again and someone does fall off the wagon, like just get back on. Like I know. Um, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry you've had to go through that because I know what it's like. It's horrible. It's really hard.
It is 100%. It's really hard. Um, I hear what you're saying about the day count and
Mm,
how people can feel like they've lost all of their progress if they have a slip or relapse.
mm,
And that's not true. Um, that's not true at all. You still have all of your days. You still have all of it. And it takes what it takes. And I mean, where I'm at today is I wonder, I've heard this before and I'm starting to believe that it's true that life conspires to break our heart over and over and over and over until it's broken open. And what's inside, if we decide to look, is like, oh my God,
mm,
you're loved, you're here, you have something amazing to share with the world. And that, maybe it means having a huge podcast and impacting millions of lives. Maybe it means just being another light that is going to do good today and everything in between.
mm.
So I feel like as hard as it's been and the mistakes I have made and like the losses and, breaking other people's hearts, I am sorry about that. And I feel like it's just been like it's a journey that I signed up for, you know, like a lot of the spiritual teachers talk about, like, you chose your parents, you chose your stuff that you were going to work through. Is it true? I don't know for sure, but it sure seems like it. So I never thought I'd be in a place where I'm feeling grateful for life being hard. And, like the story I was telling when we started about like my sisters and losing my mom, I thought for the longest time that going through that and the chaos and everything like made me trash, basically, like unworthy of a good life. And like things would never be that good for me because of where I came from and what I have gone through. And I've realized that like the amount of fortitude and strength that I have to do that, and then things that I've been through in my life, like I actually have a lot to really be proud of. And I have this inner strength to do anything. So, that is something that I can tap into. I mean, I'm still learning that. Like that's a strength that well of strength is something that I can tune into and really have as an inner resource.
If you can get over alcoholism, I think I think that actually sets you apart as being able to really move mountains, because it's yeah, you won't wish it on your worst enemy. I wouldn't wish anything on my worst enemy. I don't like that saying, but yeah, like, and it's hard for people to understand if they've not gone through it. You just can't explain it, you know. Um, yeah, I don't think about it much, I don't think about it much.
That's great.
Um, so it's a funny one. Like it feels good to like chat about it sometimes, but then also I'm kind of like, huh, you know. I didn't expect to be talking about that today. I think um, I think this is a nice place to finish up.
Okay.
Um, okay, so before we finish, I've started this thing whereby I ask the guests to, what is a question or a reflection that you and or the audience might ask themselves at the start of the day? And there are two approaches you can do. You could just have one for like you and everyone else, or it could be one specific to you and one specific to the audience.
A question to start the day.
What do you need to hear at the moment?
Hmm. Um,
Take your time.
what does my beating heart have to say to me today? And then just listen for what arises.
Mm, that's a good one. Would you use the same for the audience?
I would. I would. And I know that can be a challenging exercise for people sometimes. So if that feels interesting, but not working at it, or some, for some reason, maybe.
Yeah, they
How
just
can
can't
I?
quite tap into it. Feels a bit
Yeah.
abstract, feels a bit too much.
Um, how can I treat myself with care and kindness today?
Mm,
How can I just travel a little lighter and treat myself with care and kindness today?
yeah, that's a good one. Today's my we nearly made it through a podcast about talking about training. Today's my rest day. And my coach has been like, rest. Because I'm like, oh, maybe I could do a little session in the night, rest. and but I try and do my 10,000 steps. And before this conversation, I'm like, right, I'll go get like 5,000 steps in. And I actually have a bit of a bad knee at the moment, so I'm kind of limping a bit on the
Oh no.
on the walk, just ever so slightly. It's fine. It's just a bit stiff. It'll be fine. Um, and yeah, and then literally I was like, "Are you being kind to yourself today, Jason?" That kind of popped in. I'm like, "Oh yeah," because I was literally thinking, right, and then after the podcast, right, I'll go and do another 5,000 steps. I need to get my 10,000, and I'm like, dude, fucking slow down. It's fine. I'm actually going to go to the sauna. I mean, after this.
Nice. That sounds amazing.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not mega enjoyable. I'll suffer. It's going to be hot.
Do you do
but
infrared or traditional?
it's no, it's the other one. It's not an infrared one. It's just like a
Like a hot rock,
yeah, but I
Swedish
think it's
sauna?
just yeah, it's like a halfway between like you can't see. It's just like a heated thing behind like the wood. You don't pour anything on. It's just dry, but it's not
Oh yeah.
infrared. If that makes sense. It's like having a fire in a wood box.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, yeah, I, I'm such, I'm bad for that. Like not being kind to myself. I think sometimes.
Well, today's a new day.
Today's a new day. Well, it's getting towards a late day for me,
Okay.
um, but there's still time to sauna.
Yeah.
um,
I think I'm gonna go tonight too.
yeah, get it done.
Yeah.
Do you have like a cold plunge as well? It's like sounds like a California type thing to have.
I don't have one at my gym. We have really nice infrared saunas.
Mm,
We don't have a cold plunge there. I'd like, yeah. There is a place kind of close to me that has saunas and a cold plunge.
yeah,
I haven't been out there in a while. Maybe I should go out there. Yeah.
yeah. They actually opened a new. You might have seen it on my story. I did some modeling for them. Um, but yeah, that is actually nearby. But I'm not going to that one because that's like you have to like pay one off and stuff. So I only went because because it was free.
Yeah.
Not that I would. If anyone's listening, not that I wouldn't recommend going there. It's just yeah, I've got a membership with the other one. Anyways, spouting off loads of random shit at the end here, Jason. Julia, where can people find you if they want to find out more about you, send you a message, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. My website is aliveandkinky.com. Instagram handles, same, alive and kinky. I'm on X, YouTube, all under alive and kinky. Um, yeah, always happy to answer any questions that people have. It doesn't have to be about kink, it can be about anything. I work with couples, I work with individuals, and group programs coming soon.
Yeah, get it done.
So, yeah.
Get it done. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been awesome, and yeah, I'm so grateful that we've got this online relationship that started with I think me replying to a comment or something on Instagram, and then the beautiful beautiful side of social media and how it can bring us together is just awesome. And I'm 100% certain that I'm definitely a different person for having being made aware of all these things from your world, which I still don't really understand fully, but not that I'm putting that on you. See me messing up the crunchy landing there. That was a crunchy landing, not a floaty one. It's too late for me. It's too late for me. My brain's not working.
You can always reach out to me too anytime. If something comes up for you, like please reach out. I love talking to you. So we can like have a conversation anytime.
All right.
So
Let's do it.
yeah.
All right. Have a wonderful day, and
You
we'll speak
too.
to you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Hey guys, it's me. Thank you so much for watching that episode, and congratulations for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. A few things before you get going. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to share it with a friend or family member. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to both my guests and myself. And if you made it this far, why don't you drop me a DM?